So I will be doing my final Chinese calligraphy assignment over the aesthetic principles of Chinese calligraphy. So it seems like the four main principles of the calligraphy are the strength of the brushstroke techniques, the space management, the rhythm, and the balance. Um, so for brushstroke technique, for example, it seems like the use of certain tip control techniques will give you stronger brushstrokes. For example, the center tip technique, where the tip travels along the center of the stroke, produces sturdy lines. The element of space management is key to composition. It's also an element found in Chinese painting. Um, the calligrapher must make use of the filled space, which you will refer to as figures in Chinese calligraphy, and then the empty space, which is referred to as ground. Um, Rhythm is it's something you can find in any part of the piece. It gives it life. It depends on the degree and contrast of it depends on the degree of the contrast and intervals of the piece. Running and cursive scripts are uh, particularly popular because of their powerful sense of rhythm. Balance is each character holds a sort of balance, a sort of center of gravity, um, created by like the proper horizontal and vertical lines. Um, and it seemed that's just sort of a broad overview of that, but it seems like most good calligraphy seems to stick to these principles. Um, and as an art major, I did notice that a lot of these principles are pretty similar to what we would refer to as the elements of art. There are a lot of similarities between the Chinese calligraphy principles and the elements of art. Um, for example, space is handled very similarly. They are of similar importance to like overall composition and coordination of a piece. So like where in calligraphy you have figures and ground, we refer to space in more general art as like the negative space. And it's also important in other ways. The certain relationships between elements, of a more broader drawing, which it's not very surprising that space has a similar. It's treated similarly. It's rooted in like Chinese painting, similarly to calligraphy. So that's always kind of interesting. So I think the similarity between calligraphy and just more broader art in general kind of drives home the point that calligraphy is another art form. So as sort of like a novice artist, I guess I would call myself, I do have like mirrored experiences between calligraphy and art, in that, for example, one of my hardships that is translated as sort of a difficulty with, just controlling my lines and controlling my, pen or pencil or brush, etc. Um, when it comes to like me as like the way that I work through a piece, I am somewhat of a perfectionist. I will heavily scrutinize my own work. I will I will really like hone in on what seems to be wrong to me, and I will just work on that over and over and over until I can try and get it right. So that's and that kind of also plays into some impatience on my part as well. I think that's sort of some of my weaknesses as both a calligrapher and just in general an artist. So it's just kind of interesting how those you know it's a similar it comes from a similar place, I guess you could say. Um, so just to get into more of the artwork we did this semester, I have a regular script. I believe this was done with water, with the like beginner kits we had with water rather than ink. So yeah, there's regular script 1, I believe. And then here's an example of seal script, also from water. Clerical script. See how it's kind of like the water had been fading a bit. I think this might have been one of the tougher pieces, which is that I had to kind of go slowly on, so the water had faded. Cursive script. I used ink here, ink on rice paper, and I was drawing a bit larger than I was used to, so the characters are like a bit thin, a bit messy. And then here I have one of my favorite works and a picture of me with it. This was with ink on rice paper. It was a regular script, I believe, and it's not perfect, but I do think it's one of the nicer things I've done. So I would consider it probably among of all of what I've done, one of my favorite pieces. And so onto reflection, and here I have just a few more pieces that I had taken pictures of, kind of just laying around throughout the semester here while I talk. But throughout this semester, I've come to appreciate Chinese calligraphy as it's one of the more like graceful writing systems, coming from like English, like, which is an alphabetic language. I think the Western idea of calligraphy is a bit different. We have like cursive writing. It doesn't, using our letters, it doesn't really work the same as calligraphy. So I feel like there is a lot to learn. It requires a lot of skill and experience and patience. It's very interesting. As someone who is interested in art, I find it very captivating. Just very serene in general. So the Chinese calligraphy course has been a very interesting, very educational experience.